Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the Michigan punishments that have come down from those COVID-19 recruiting violations that were plenty. But we'll see how those develop, and obviously the sign stealing scandal that is coming up. I'm sure that case will be starting here pretty soon, so we will keep you updated with all of that. But now it's time to talk about the Kansas State Wildcats, and this is a team that I think a lot of people are watching, especially with the new Big 12 era that is starting without Texas and OU and all of the Big 12 teams coming, or Pac-12 teams, excuse me, coming in. I think Kansas State has a great chance to make some noise this year. Now, them not playing a spring game makes this a little bit tougher, but, I'll give you what I know for the time being, and then maybe we'll revise this as the season goes on. But whenever you talk about Kansas State, it all starts with Avery Johnson. There's no two ways about that. He is the guy that makes this team special in a lot of ways. But I think there's so many great things about this team outside of Avery Johnson, but he is the difference maker. The guy right there is the person that will make this train go and will make them win a Big 12 title, take them to the playoff, give them a shot to really be the TCU of this year, kind of. And it'll be really interesting to watch as we go through it. But let's jump through this team kind of the way we have been for the last couple of weeks. We'll go offense, we'll go defense, and then we'll go through their schedule really quickly, and then some overall thoughts of what I kind of expect from this team and what they're capable of going into this year. But let's start with the offensive side of the ball. It's a really solid group, and it has been really since Chris Kleiman took over as head coach. Now, they do have some changes. They do have a new offensive coordinator in Connor Riley, who is the O-line coach for the past 6 years, before Colin Klein was hired at A&M, and they had to replace him. So it'll be interesting to see how he kind of takes the reins there. Probably will be the play caller there, so it'll be interesting to see how he can kind of handles that and can put this team into action. Now, the great thing for him is you have a guy like Avery Johnson at quarterback. He is an absolute game changer. He's someone that can totally change the complexion of any game that you're in. He is apparently taken on the leader role much more this year. Obviously was behind Will Johnson for the majority of last year at least, and now is the guy all year round, 365 days a year. So he needs to be able to be that leader, be that vocal leader that they need, and he's been able to do that at least early on. Apparently his arm looks as incredible as his legs, which if you're someone that has watched him at all, you know just how special he is when he gets out of the pocket and is able to extend plays. As long as he's healthy, they're going to get big-time quarterback play. But the depth at that position is not necessarily as strong as you would hope. So maybe they're in the market for a quarterback in the portal. It'll be interesting to watch that develop. But the running backs is a solid group, but definitely could use some influx of some guys for sure. I think DJ Giddens is the experienced guy in that room. Definitely a very good running back. More of a power guy than kind of a breakaway speed type of guy, but definitely very talented, has had a ton of experience in that offense, and has done a lot of really, really good things for them throughout his time. Joe Jackson is another guy there. He's a backup at the as a redshirt freshman, and they could be looking for a guy in the portal here as well. So I think quarterback and running back are two positions where there's definitely some help to be had for sure, but at the end of the day, it'll be interesting to see what kind of happens with this group overall as we kind of go on throughout this time. Sorry, I'm reading a comment over here about the Michigan court cases. I'd be very surprised if they took away their national title, but who knows? It'll be a lot of interesting things happening here down the barrel. But let's move on to wide receivers here for Kansas State, and this is an interesting group that's going to be relying big time on a big-time transfer, and that's Dante Cephas, a grad transfer from Penn State. He's going to have to be huge for them. He never really hit his stride at Penn State, never really got to the level that they were expecting from him, but Kent State was for real. He was just incredible on that team. He was all over the place. So if he can kind of find that again and get more comfortable in this offense as opposed to the Penn State one, then maybe he could blow up the way that Nittany Lion fans were really hoping for last year. And then you have Keegan Johnson and J.C. Brown on the outside who are kind of working their way into bigger roles as guys like Phillip Brooks finds his way out of the program, who is a very talented guy, was one of the most consistent guys in that wide receiver room, and just the ultimate third down target. So huge for them as they kind of go through this. Um, at tight end, it's kind of being held down right now by Garrett Oakley, and he's definitely a solid choice for them. Ben Sinnott is the guy that's walking out the door. He's very tough to replace. He was so important to their offense, both run and pass. I think Garrett Oakley is definitely up to the challenge. Is 6'5", 230, so a big guy that can definitely block, but they might need some help there as well. Will Swanson is another name to watch there, but it's going to be mostly a running offense, so not necessarily a ton of athletic ability or receiving ability needed, but it feels like they have a solid group that could use a little bit of help here and there. But the O-line, even though they do return Carver Willis, Hadley Panzer, and Taylor Portier, they are replacing 4 multi-year starters on this offensive line. Connor Beebe being the main among them. He was a huge time player for them throughout the last couple of years, and replacing him is going to be very, very tough. They did add transfer Easton Kitley from North Dakota. They got a ton of other guys that can help them out. They have Andrew Lean Gang, Sam Hecht, and John Pastor. So a really solid group overall, a group that even though they're replacing so many guys, it feels like they have plenty of depth to kind of at least hold their own in the Big 12. They might want to go find the right guy in the portal here and there, but at the end of the day, overall a very solid group, which it usually is under Chris Kleiman, to be totally honest. But let's move on to the defense, and let's start with the D-line. The D-line is kind of a 3-4 front, if you're familiar. So 3 down linemen and 4 linebackers in this kind of formation. And it'll be really, or they kind of more play a 3-3-5, to be totally honest with you. But that means they use a nose tackle, which is Usu Siomalu. He's someone that just got back to practice this spring and apparently has looked really, really good. So he will likely be the starter at nose tackle. They have lost guys like Nate Matlack and Khalid Duke on the outsides, but they have Brendan Mott, Cody Stufflebean. They have tons of guys that are ready to step up and be big-time players. So I think edge rushing and defensive line has always been a really good strength for Kansas State throughout Chris Kleiman's time, and while there's not necessarily those big-time names that they might have had in the past, I think they still can do a ton of really, really good things. There's still tons of talent all over the field. They got Jordan Allen and Chidi Obiazor, I think, is someone that they're very excited about. They have so many guys that are just all over the place, so I think this is a group that is going to be rotating a ton. They're going to try to get as many fresh legs in there as possible because they don't necessarily have the down-in, down-out edge rusher, but they have plenty of guys that can contribute for sure. But let's move to what I consider to be the strongest part of this defense and the linebacker group. They're led by Austin Moore, an all Big 12 second-team selection a year ago, and it's a really strong group. Desmond Purnell is right next to him, who was a Big 12 honorable mention a year ago, and then Jake Clifton, who's kind of working his way back from injury, but is a very talented kid that has a ton of ability, is right next to them. So there's a ton of talent, there's a ton of experience in this group, and I think this is the group that will really define this defense in a number of ways. They will not be able to run very well on them. All of these guys can play in coverage if they absolutely need to, so it'll be interesting to see this linebacker core kind of being the catalyst of this defense going forward. And then let's get to the back end. The corners are kind of an interesting group. I've talked about Jacob Parrish a little bit. I think he is comfortably the best of the bunch. I really like his game, and I think he's very talented. Now, Keenan Garber is a very solid player across for him. The problem is those are really the 2 guys that you look at, and then the rest is kind of So the depth definitely needs to be built out for them more and more as we go through these next couple of weeks. I could see them being very active in the portal pretty much across a ton of different positions, but especially corner and maybe safety, although safety feels a little bit more safe there. They did already get some help from the transfer portal. Jordan Riley, a transfer from Ball State, is someone that has been getting a ton of praise throughout spring and is going to be a big-time player for them. VJ Payne was 3rd on the team in tackles last year, and I think he's going to be a big player for them. I think this back end overall is relatively solid. They definitely could use some depth on that back end, but the front five is going to be a really solid group that is going to be hard to pass against. That's for sure. But it'll be interesting to see this defense kind of build out. I think there are so many positions where the top line looks really good and looks really strong, but the guys behind them just look like they're, a step behind, a step below. So it's definitely something that you'll be wanting to watch throughout this time. Who does Kansas State pick up? Do they fit the mold? Do they fit the positions of need? And can they elevate this team? Because I think this is already a very good team. I think this is already a team that could comfortably win 8 games or comfortably win 9 games. I think if they add the right guys in the portal, they could comfortably win 10 or 11 or win the Big 12 title and go to the playoffs. So there's a lot of big things that could happen over the next couple of weeks for them. But let's break down the schedule real quick here, and then we'll get into kind of my overall thoughts. So they start the season on October 31st against UT Martin. That's an easy win. I don't think there's any question about that. If it's not an easy win, then a lot of the rest of the season changes very quickly for Kansas State. But then they go to at Tulane, which is a very tough matchup. Then they go home and play Arizona on a Friday night. So it gets real very quickly. This is kind of a front-loaded schedule, to be totally honest with you. After Arizona, they go at BYU, which is a sketchy one in between Arizona and Oklahoma State, because Oklahoma State comes to town the very next week, and BYU is one of those teams that likely won't be a big-time team this upcoming year, but things always get very interesting in Provo when you have to go in and get a big-time win in between two games like Arizona and Oklahoma State. It can get sketchy pretty quickly. So a ton of the work will be done before that first bye. If they go into that first bye 5-0 and, seem to be rolling, they would comfortably be my betting favorites for the Big 12. And it'll be interesting to see what Utah does over that same amount of time because, as you see, they do not play each other, which is the very interesting part of this. We all kind of expect them to be the top 2 teams in the conference. They might just have to face off in Dallas at the end of the year, so it'll be interesting to watch that. But after the bye, they get at Colorado, which is a sketchy one just because of the talent level of Colorado. You don't really know what they'll look like by week 7, so it'll be interesting to watch that. At West Virginia is always a big-time atmosphere that they're going to have to be careful of, but should be able to win. But both of those games in general are games that if they drop them, I would not necessarily be surprised, and if they drop them, they better get very, very intentional about the way that they go about games going forward, because they can't drop a ton of games because of the way the Big 12 is going to shake out. It's going to be so tough, so crowded up at the top that I think losing maybe even 2 games might bury you in this new Big 12. But we'll see what happens there. Then they get Kansas at home, which is a huge one to get at home. And then Houston. At Houston, excuse me. I apologize for not putting that on there. But at Houston is the next game. That should be a win, but although with Willie Fritz coming in, he can do a number of big-time things against big schools. Obviously, knocked off USC when he was at Tulane, so I would be on the watch for that one before their last bye of the year. And then the final 3 are Arizona State at home, Cincinnati at home, before heading to Ames for a game at Iowa State. So all 3 of those should be doable games. Iowa State is a little bit sketchy. Arizona State has been building out that talent more and more, but all of those are very doable, and they should be able to win those games. So the schedule overall, when you come into the season and, Utah joins your conference and you don't have to play them, that's always a great thing, especially when you're a team that's vying for that spot in Dallas at the end of the year. It'll be really interesting to watch how this team kind of develops throughout the year, and is it kind of a collision course between them and Utah where they both are rolling through the Big 12 schedules and doing everything that we expected them to do, only for them to meet in Dallas for a spot in the playoff, which I think would just be incredible television. But overall thoughts on this team, I think when you look at this team, it is not a big variable team. You know what they have, you know the guys that they have, and especially you know the coach they have, and Chris Klieman and the staff that he's put together. They're going to be a solid team. They've been a solid team for a number of years now, and I expect that to continue at least as long as Chris Klieman is in the building. So it'll be really interesting to see how they kind of navigate through this schedule. Obviously, they don't have necessarily the injury history that someone like Utah has with Cam Rising, so that's a worry for them. You're not necessarily worried about getting as gutted as someone like Arizona might be over the next 2 weeks. So Kansas State's kind of in this steady position where they have a coach they all trust fully. They have players that want to be there day in, day out, and don't necessarily waver very much. And they have a fan base that seems to be growing and growing and being more and more committed to this team. So I think everything is looking really, really good in Manhattan, Kansas. And I think overall, when you look at the two sides of the ball, there's a little bit to build out, right? Over the next couple of weeks, I think they'll be looking for rotational pieces. They'll be looking for guys at different positions. Wide receiver and running back are two that I'm watching, possibly even a backup quarterback being picked up. It's really just kind of building out depth for the most part, and they're going to have really good guys behind the ones, but at the end of the day, you really do need elite level players. If not only you want to win the Big 12, but if I know anything about Chris Kleiman and that program, they don't want to stop there. They want to be able to make noise in the playoff, and to do that, you have to be good 2 deep, you have to be good 3 deep. So I think this portal will be an interesting one for Kansas State, where I think they could be very active. I think they could sit totally still, and it could give you kind of an idea of what they think of their team. Do they think they have the depth necessary? Are they worried about that? But we'll find that out over the next couple of weeks, and this Kansas State team could look a little bit different, at least in terms of the foundation of this team. I think the top end will look a lot similar in the next 2 weeks, but there could be some players that come in that give them some big-time rotational pieces. To be totally honest, right now, I would have them at number 2 in the Big 12. I would have them behind Utah. I just think Cam Rising is a more consistent choice, as long as he's on the field, of course. It'll be really interesting to see what develops there, but in my opinion, Avery Johnson is the best player in the conference. I think he is the biggest difference maker in the conference. While Cam Rising might be the more stable choice, I think the ability of Avery Johnson far outweighs the ability of Cam Rising, and his ceiling is just pretty considerably higher, to be totally honest with you. So very excited for this team overall. Kansas State has the ability to become the team in the Big 12 this year. Everyone in the Big 12 right now is looking to kind of set their rubber stamp. Obviously, Kansas State won it only a couple of years ago, so they're the team that everyone's kind of watching, but Utah's coming in. There's tons of other teams that will have a viable choice at it, but whoever wins this is sitting at the top of the mountaintop for the Big 12, and who knows when you're going to be able to knock them down. So I think this is a huge year for Kansas State. It's a huge year for Utah. It'll be really interesting to see those two teams hopefully be battling out in Dallas, because I think that would be a remarkable matchup, to be totally honest with you. But really like this team overall. Need to patch some holes and then get things rolling, but the Big 12 is totally wide open, and they are the team that, in my opinion, might be the most steady choice, although I am leaning Utah because of their wide receiver talent and all of that type of thing. But the Wildcats have a chance to really grab the Big 12 by their throat, and it'll be really interesting to see them do that, because Chris Kleiman does not lose very often, but he's going up against Kyle Whittingham, who doesn't lose very often. So it'll be really interesting to see that battle unfold, especially with them not playing each other and kind of eyeing each other from a distance. But that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference for us. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or X, TikTok, Instagram for all of the content and updates you could possibly need. We have people covering every sport in the world. We have so many people covering football. We have basketball, baseball, wrestling. We have a women's sports podcast that is coming out very soon that you guys should definitely check out. So if you need anything, just come over to GSMC and we have you covered. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you guys tomorrow.